National Peace Committee says it has received reports of voter suppression manifested across the country through targeted violence, disruption of process, inducement of voters, intimidation, and deliberate frustration of voters. In a statement signed by the national chairman of the committee, General Abdulsalam Abu Bakr, the committee says it is pleased that INEC has accepted the lapses and has promised to rectify it. The committee says it wants concerns about failure of INEC results viewing portals across the country thoroughly investigated. The Peace Committee has asked candidates and party chairmen to take full responsibility for statements made by their spokespersons and agents while appealing to citizens to remain calm. Well, there have been heated exchanges at the National Coalition Center here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, between party representatives and INEC Chairman Mahmood Yakubu, with the parties demanding greater transparency in announcing the results.
Cannot be using justification that a vote took place at the polling unit when INEC failed in uploading results from polling units. If you had uploaded those results immediately after vote was casted in each polling unit, we will have access to them and I will not be asking questions here. But as I speak to you, those results were not uploaded for hours. Yesterday, I complained to you, the chairman. I complained to two other commissioners, and in my presence, they called the rec in Imo, where even the director of ICT was saying they should use offline to upload.
When there were efforts to undermine the authority of INEC, we stood firmly that INEC must be truly independent. Mr. Chairman, we're talking about the transparency of this process, and we're talking about confidence in the process. I had cause, sir, to engage you yesterday. I had cause to speak to your national commissioners yesterday. I had cause to speak to them this morning about coalition and abuse of the electoral process. Mr. Chairman, as we speak, in a number of states, efforts are still ongoing to undermine that process. It is clear that there were problems with uploading the results, which is fundamental to where we are. And we are saying it is important that we know, that Nigerians are aware, that electorates know that the votes they've cast were properly uploaded and it reflects the wishes of the people from polling units.
And now we have Professor Abiodun Adeni joining us to take a look at some of these situations. He's the Deputy Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes University here in Abuja. Good to have you, and thanks for your time as always. We're going to take this through past midnight if you don't mind. But first, let's go to Bayelsa, home state of former Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan, to have a sense of what's happening there in Bayelsa. An update of proceedings there. But for now, we're back in our studios here in Abuja with Professor Abiodun Adeni. Good to see you, and thanks for your time. You know, this is the waiting period, and Nigerians have never had this kind of apprehension in a long time concerning an election. Let's start first with the big story coming from Nigeria's former president Olusegun Obasanjo, who's spoken about, he was categorical, he was emphatic about what he thinks may have happened on election day.
That from him, he's somebody who is really very straightforward, very trenchant, and of course he volunteers most of the time, always very forthcoming when there are issues. He doesn't shy away from joining issues, neither does he shy away from triggering any whenever he feels concerned. And for another statement of his stature, you cannot take that away from me. It's always a welcome development for the nation to benefit from his wealth of experience and his wisdom, right? You know, but he raised some critical points, you know, that there should be a discontinuation of the process, you know, just like what some party agents are saying. And I think it created a little bit of middle ground, saying that it might not just be a total discontinuation, but consideration should be given for areas where concerns have been genuinely raised. You know, and those concerns border on whether or not results have been properly sent, uploaded to the server, to the INEC server. And where we have found that results were not appropriately uploaded onto the server, INEC should do some double checking, you know. And of course, he went further to say that a committee should be set up, etc., etc. I think that's not too bad an intervention, not a bad thing to say. But like I was trying to tell Christian earlier, my only point of departure, you know, was his use of words, you know. I mean, saying blood money and some kind of words that you...
And that's why I said it was emphatic and very categorical.
You know, very some of those things might be difficult to prove.
Let me jump in here, because earlier on I spoke with Dr. Sam Amadi, and he said, well, as former president, he may have some intel. So perhaps that's what he's basing his comments on.
It is possible, but again, we have to consider those who are the receiving end of those accusations, you know. They also have feelings, and whether we like it or not, at some level, they're also making their sacrifices. There are ways in which we can make our point. There are ways in which we can be as hard as we want without necessarily degenerating into using words that people might consider hurtful, you know, not necessarily offensive. And when some words, when they bruise the egos of persons, it might push them on the defensive, take away the chances for diplomatic intervention, take away the chances for compromise, you know, and get them to be on the defensive and probably even want to hit back at the revered general himself, which some of us might consider unsalutary, given his contribution to the development of this country. Otherwise, his intervention is welcome. And do not forget, we also had the chairman of the National Peace Committee, you know, populated by former head of state Abdusalami, my Lord Bishop Kuka, Bishop Banarikon, all of them also speaking, and you could see that his language was largely appropriate, you know, and of course cautioning everyone to keep the peace, remain calm, you know, while interventions are brought into the process. And I think the silver lining now is INEC chairman promising us that by tomorrow he's going to address the nation on IRF. You know, whatever he's going to say, we'll have to await it. It might also be possible that he might heed the advice or the admonitions of those who are asking him to discontinue the process until reviews are made. You know, he might as well do that, or continue with the collation of the result and maybe announcing it at the end of the day. But the point I've also made is that there are rooms for redress. You know, painful as it is, irritating as it is, you know, sometimes very disappointing. There are rooms for redress, and that's the hallmark of democracy. Really, you know, where we have a trinity, the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. The judiciary is there, you know, and we can go to courts at the end of the day. And the main parties involved, really, are people who have fought battles in courts before, and they have successfully brought in our jurisdiction. Peter Obi, you know, it may not have been Peter Obi today if he had chickened out through the kind of battering and badgering he experienced in Anambra State. He went to the court several times and kept his seat. You know, but if he had chickened out, he wouldn't have been who he is today. And he succeeded largely in broadening our jurisprudence. And look at him now. If you see him, you just know that this person has a date with history. He has a date with destiny in the evolution of our democracy and the evolution of this country. You know, I'm not going to be surprised if at the end of the day he's not declared as the winner if he goes to court, and nobody knows who can tell. Nobody knows what might happen at the end of the day. He might be the first person to create an off-season election at the president at the national level, just like he created it at the state level. Do not forget, he was the one that started this off-season, off-cycle election. He might also be the first person. We can't tell. I'm just making... and of course, Atiku as well. Atiku too has been a veteran of many judicial battles. He had several cases against President Obasanjo who wanted to shove him off his back, you know, why they had a joint ticket in PDP. And to the Supreme Court, he was reminded that, no, you cannot do that because you have a joint ticket. You know, so there are ways of redress, painful as this development is. You know, the fact that INEC was not able to keep to his words and upload results onto server so that complaints will not have arisen, because INEC has shot itself on the foot by giving room for these complaints that we are having, this kind of experience that seems to dent the credibility and integrity of the election which would otherwise have expected to be salutary, given where we are coming from. We have advanced in democracy, really.
You know, Professor Adeni, let me butt in here. Now you're talking about our judicial process, you know, taking us back in time, looking at what Peter Obi stood for and his belief in our judiciary and that of our former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Now, not trying to preempt INEC into getting into a decision. Do you think the political parties who have complained so far don't have a case?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think they have very strong cases, and they actually they proved it severally today, because INEC, not just the political parties, INEC severally assured the citizens that they are ready for this election. You know, technology is going to be injected into it, just like we saw them, just like they did in Ondo, in Edo, and in Osun State. Instantaneous rendition of results, you know, from the polling unit onto the server, and of course we were able to monitor the election, the results in real time. They did it in the off-season election, so it was taken for granted that they were going to replicate it at the national level. And the mistake they probably made was that they didn't test run their facility well enough, realizing that this time around it's not going to be, you know, you're not operating at the level of the units, but you're operating at the level of the whole. There should have been consequential testing.
And keep in mind, I hope you don't lose your train of thought.
No.
Because keep in mind, the political parties then had asked for a demo. You recall, they were asking, show us, let us know how the workability of this process.
I think INEC did more of talking, more of giving assurances than actually getting down to the act.
Demonstration.
That's right. Like, you know, they didn't really. I'm not sure they got cracking well enough to have been able to perfect the process in advance of the election. And I remember Senator Gina Milaye mentioned it today that INEC chairman gave assurance about 70-something times, while the INEC spokesman, you know, the commissioner in charge of voter education, Barrister Festus Okoye, gave it over 100 times, and so they were all assured. You know, so whether the elections were rigged or not, the fact that this part of the piece, that this piece in the jigsaw is missing, provided a window for those who are going to complain, and that's why you cannot really say, you know, they are wrong. So they are just, their protestations are legitimate. But again, we are happy so far. They're going to toe legitimate means to make their case. That's the signals we're getting.
No, that's very important. That whoever is aggrieved should actually look in that direction. But again, it still comes back to BVAS, a system that authenticate the voter. Isn't it amazing that now we're still talking about overvoting? So it tells one thing. Logically, it tells you that perhaps maybe BVAS didn't go around authenticating everyone in that particular polling unit.
But the problem with this major election, this election really, it's not about the BVAS. It's about uploading the results, you know, to the INEC server. That's the
I don't want to jump in the gun now, because my question is about the overvoting. If we experienced overvoting, for instance, polling unit A2, and we were meant to use BVAS to authenticate the voters who will come before that polling officer, it tells that BVAS perhaps wasn't used.
Well, it is possible. That's one case. The other case is to just imagine how complex the human character can be, Suleiman. As you are trying to prevent rigging, you are trying to minimize human contacts with the process. You know, those who want to perpetrate mischief are also thinking ahead of you. You know, but so the task we have is to continue to also think ahead of them, to try as much as possible so that we can forestall them. And that's why we say crime is dynamic. You know, the criminal is always thinking of how to beat the system. So do not forget that sections of the populace are still very, very desperate, including voters. You know, desperate to see that they win the election. So you cannot rule out the fact that, as simple as it is, as straightforward as it is, you know, and as maybe efficient as it can be, people are still determined, you know, to make sure that they circumvent it. Some people might just be a fantasy, a fancy, a pleasure, okay, you are saying that this thing is watertight. I'm going to fathom ways of defeating it. So it could just be, it could be one of many
apologies,
reasons.
taking the word off you now, determination, that people were determined. That for the first time in the history of Nigeria, we saw a determined lot, young Nigerians, some of your students, some of them were first-time voters, and the enthusiasm with which these people trooped out, irrespective of the weather inclement, they braced the odd. And perhaps that is why, again, the cries are louder.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there has been a build-up to this moment. Do not forget, the populace has been, particularly the young ones, they've been largely galvanized, you know, through the social media. They become much more conscious, much more participatory, much more integrated into the system. And integration sometimes begin from the psychological, from the psychological sphere, in terms of internalizing ethos of democracy 23, 24 years after. And some of them have been longing to be participants, physical participants voting, and they've been conscious, you know, conscientized largely through the youth budge, increased youth population, which has evened up to us having a large number of youths, you know, as registrants, you know. So we are seeing this manifesting now, leading to the passion that you identified, the enthusiasm to vote, you know, defying all odds, all elements, and staying through the time, you know, irrespective of impediments on their way. I mean, that came on their way. Some of them stayed as late as midnight just to make sure that they voted. And it just tells you that we are evolving, our democracy is growing, but the character is still poor. But I took something very important from what one of the international advisors said today, which is also tried relatively, that democracy is a journey. It's not a destination. And the electoral process too, which is an important mechanism in cementing democracy, is no less so. It's also a journey, not a destination. But again, when we want to say that we are imperfect, our election is imperfect, our imperfection should be contextual, not the one that is avoidable. Not errors can be committed, but not errors that can be avoidable. The one we witnessed on Saturday is largely avoidable. That remains at the top step of INEC, and I expect some remedy from them, but should begin first with an apology and of course some remedy. But I'm not going to subscribe to the a whole idea that the entire process, you know, should be cancelled. You know, that I think will be too costly for us, and it will be a major distraction, a major drain on our wallet as well. Remedies can be made, the result can change. Nobody knows who's going to win now. For me, I don't know until until everything is concluded and INEC declares it. So whoever wins at the end of the day, you know, should be one that will be conciliatory, that will be able to calm frayed nerves, you know, considering that we have had a tense moment and there has been right predictions in the past that this election is going to be close and that we are seeing it happening. The fact that it is close is also reflected in the fact that we are witnessing so much anxiety, our emotions are being drained, tension is in the land, you know, and until a final satisfactory or relatively satisfactory conclusion is reached, it's going to continue. But we do not want it to degenerate or to snowball into emptiness. That's what is going to be dangerous for us.
Well, it's a fine place for us to take a moment.